Welcome to the NCO Journal podcast, where we explore NCO professional development. I'm your host, Staff Sergeant Jared Woods. With me in the studio today is Managing Editor of the NCO Journal, Chago Zapata. In this episode, we're discussing a recent article series titled The Information Domain and Social Media. Also with us today is one of the authors of the article, Sergeant Major Alexander Aguilestrat. Welcome to the podcast, Sergeant Major. Please tell us a little about yourself.
Hey, how you guys doing? Alexander Aguilestrat here. I'm Sergeant Major of the United States Army. I'm an infantryman by trade. I've been in for 27 years. My most recent assignment was as part of the Enlisted Initiatives Group in TRADOC, and kind of a think tank. Before I was the Command Sergeant Major of JTF Bravo. Prior to that, I was the Command Sergeant Major for Charlie Squadron Asymmetric Warfare Group with a permanent presence in the Middle East, and some other assignments ranging from light, mech, and airborne infantry. Very happy to be here. Thank you for having me here, and thanks for the opportunity.
I'm glad to have you there, Sergeant Major. So let's dive into the article here. You first talk about social media as a weapon and its use in a form of asymmetric warfare. What do you mean by that?
Well, social media in the everyday context can be seen as very banal and very benign, right? But I think sometimes we fail to give it its military context in the area of multi-domain operations, right? The information domain, you can see it everywhere. You cannot live without being bombarded by information. So our adversaries know that kinetically we hold the advantage still. I mean, our ability to build combat power, project combat power, combine arms maneuver is unmatched, and they know that. But hybrid warfare incorporates various modes of warfare to deny conventional capabilities, irregular formations, tactics, coercion, and disorder. Look, it is in the area of disinformation and social media are corrosive, affected the information domain. So our enemies, our adversaries like the Russians, use it to shape their operations. They are protected by layers and layers on disinformation. They use it to alter our perspective or divide us or prepare for large-scale operations. I mean, they did it in Georgia prior to the invasion of Georgia with disinformation. They did it when they invaded the Donbass region in the Ukraine. They bombarded it with disinformation. ISIS did it. They a low-tech compared to the United States terrorist organization used marketing tactics used by Taylor Swift to swell their ranks in the thousands, from teenagers from European teenagers that they didn't even knew who was ISIS, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a tactical problem, much like the IED, that can have strategic consequences. For example, in the early stages of the Iraq War and the War on Terror, we had this IED. It was a tactical problem, but combined over time, combined with an effective information campaign, very effective information campaign by our enemies, it started having a strategic effect, such as eroding the national resolve for the war. If that was the strategic consequences, and then that prompted our government, our army, to create the IED Defeat Task Force and the Asymmetric Warfare Group. So we engaged in a little bit of an arms race with that. Now we're dealing with electronic and information IEDs that, of course, they are tactical problems, but over time, you can see the effects right now. You can see the effects of this information. You have Russian tactical commanders that know they can operate with impunity because they are protected by layers and layers of disinformation. Disinformation affects our society and divides our society, which is the foundation of American strength. It attacks our diversity. It divides opinions. And in the area of great power competition, that is very important. As part of this new operational environment. So what I would say is that it is very important to not hold social media as a standalone product, right? I mean, we're not talking about social media darlings. We're talking about the military implications of social media. And to do so, we need to place it under the umbrella of the information domain and the new era of multi-domain operations. And then that is the area in which our enemies are matching us or surpassing us due to their liberties and their ability to exploit and do tactical offensive cyber or social media or information domain operations from the tactical level, something that we're a little bit limited on.
Did you have something you wanted to add with that, Chago?
Well, in this day and age, Sergeant Major, there's so many things out there, misinformation. There's from all aspects, not just social media, but in general, the internet is a way that people get information that's not necessarily that's misinformation or disinformation. How can soldiers combat that?
Oh, it's very simple. I mean, there's power in simplicity. I mean, I think senior enlisted leaders are already combating that. For example, tell the truth, right? You just tell the truth to your soldiers. Soldiers are nowadays are smarter than they ever were. They are. This generation of tactile learners, I'm a huge fan. And in order for them to project trust and loyalty to them, and to earn the trust and loyalty back, you have to be transparent. Look, I'm a big fan of what Sergeant Major Terrenas, the 10th Mountain Division Sergeant Major, did after the incident of the shoot house on February 21st, 2021. Right, that's a great vignette. So a body camera shows soldiers conducting a live fire, close quarters battle, displaying numerous safety violations and pretty much not doing things right. Right. So 10th Mountain paused, thought about it, and then put the master trainer out there, which is the command sergeant major, the senior enlisted leader of the division, executing his commander's intent under the guideline and telling the truth, going out there with a stoic face, right, and seeing a senior enlisted leader telling the truth, telling the army, yeah, we messed up. I assume full responsibility, but we're gonna train to fix it. The video received overwhelming audience engagement, and it was a breath of fresh air seeing a senior enlisted leader tackling readiness, not being a social media darling, not pushing an agenda, no, accepting responsibility, living up to the Army values and say, okay, this happened, we will fix it with tough, realistic training, that readiness for war for the key tenets of this division, the army, which is fight to win our nation's wars and make us more deadly. And this will not happen again. And again, I take full responsibility. The support for that video was overwhelming. And it was simple, right? So that's the deal. Truth, the army values, and that's how you fight this thing. The mistake comes with imposing rules and telling commanders, you have to post this, you have to be out there. No, this is a commander's discretion. And again, this is far of the information domain. And I don't know if that answers your question, but there's power in simplicity, right? Just go out there and tell the truth to your soldiers, to the American people, to everybody else. And you know what? Sometimes we are going to make mistakes, on the mistakes like the 10th Mountain Division did, and fix those mistakes and be transparent about it. Be open to scrutiny, be open to the American people to see you, and that is the best way to fight disinformation.
That's a great answer. On a separate note, uh, what about those individuals? What would you say to the individuals who don't like or don't use social media? What would you say to them? There's some people like I'll be straight. It's mostly the older generation, soldiers at your stage of your career, who will say, "Well, I don't use social media. I don't like it. I don't trust it," and they don't use that or in any way associated with it. What would you say to those people?
Well, that's a twofold question, right? Number one, you're right. It's more often than not the older generation, us, and I make myself part of it. But I will say this again. This is a repeating theme. Place social media under the umbrella of the information domain, right? So people like you and I that have been that grew up under the umbrella of fighting a global threat, right? And we are pre-war on terror. We didn't grow up. We grew up with the Russian threat and the large Iraqi armies, Iranians, and North Koreans. If we don't fill the information domain with our story, with the truth, like 10th Mountain Division did. I mean, I can't get enough kudos to the 10th Mountain. The enemy will, nefarious actors will, both foreign and domestic, foreign to unstabilize our ranks and seed the uh, plant the seeds of doubt and domestic organizations on nefarious, violent, extreme organizations to recruit our youth, right, our soldiers, and they're already doing it. So if we're not out there in a measurable way, with a measured response, with a clear and concise message, knowing our unit's purpose and communicating, then the enemy will. And I understand that every gap is filled with negatives. I mean, we see it in the kinetic battlefield. If we leave key terrain, the enemy will take the key terrain and build up on. The information domain is no different. It's just digital. Um, Strategy is strategy, war is war, and enemy actions are enemy actions, whether it's on the information domain or in a kinetic sense. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes plenty of sense to me. I think that was an excellent response to that question. It's one of these things that social media right now is a way. You say it plenty of times here in your article. It's a way for nefarious actors to get misinformation to disinformation, across to a vast audience, to an entire nation, as you can say happened to our nation here over the last election. And it's something that we need to watch out for. Now, what about those who do their? I mean, you hear a lot about people doing their research, whether it's through social media, getting their news through social media, or through the internet. What would you say about that?
I think we need to be careful, right? I mean, there's too much information is bad. Too much information can go into the realms of disinformation. But look at this. I mean, let's take the example of ISIS in Mosul. And when I was with the asymmetric warfare group, ISIS was our problem set. So we took a deep dive into it. When they invaded northern Iraq in 2014, they only have 1,500 militants. That's it. They picked up weapons and vehicles from previous extremist groups. I mean, we really ignored them for a little while, but they decided to take another approach, right? They decide to go into the hashtag all eyes on ISIS, and then they place an extensive network of passionate supporters and Twitter bots to lock all over the trending hashtags for Arabic speakers. So they monopolized the information domain. They did with everything. I mean, and then as a result, ISIS online tactics and mastery of the information domain recruited 30,000. You heard it right, 30,000 from 100 countries, and spread free globally. So that is, they not only did that by expressing their message, but they also by syncing other types of information, truthful information, down all the way down. So knowing where to get the information, and this is where trust is important. Like, again, 10th Mountain Division, um, you know, place a lot of emphasis on their campaign. When they should have started on trust and the truth. So the truth builds trust. So based on that, trust builds loyalty, and they see some Major Terranus' information venues like his Twitter account or his Facebook page from 10th Mountain Division Sergeant Major, or anybody that does that. He's not the only one. Our army is filled with truthful leaders. Let me make that very clear. When you see that in a continuous way, then people know where to go to get the right information. So that kind of compromise, that kind of social contract that we have, the leaders to tell the truth, and our juniors or American people to know that they're telling the truth. So creating those links and creating those bonds, right, counters negative narratives such, hashtag all eyes on ISIS and everything else. So it's polar opposites, like the yin and the yang. If they go the negative way, we have to stay truthful and correct, even if it takes admitting our failures, and that's okay. That's perfectly okay. But that being said, okay, as leaders, as an army, we have to accept that the information domain is an operational environment, just like any contested battle space. Various actors have real world goals, and look, they got this ISIS top recruiter, Junaid Hussein. He didn't do He didn't do anything. The guy didn't know anything about social media. He wasn't. I mean, ISIS said, I need you to recruit a lot of people. So what did he use? He used the tactics that the singer Taylor Swift used to sell her records.
Can you tell us
And it worked.
What those tactics were? That was one of the questions that kind of came up.
Just the whole marketing thing, the whole hashtags, the whole reaching to, it's pretty much reaching down to the targeted demographics, like teenagers, young people, military age people, and the youth ages, right? So in 2014, we weren't really targeting them. We weren't really extensive use our Twitter accounts, and they went to Twitter, but they also went to Facebook, Instagram, and all these other venues that their targeted demographics utilize heavily, and they convinced them. So it was a targeting operation, and they understood their operational environment, and they created a targeting campaign, and as a result, they swelled their ranks with 30,000 fighters. And you already know what happened in Iraq and in Mosul. I was there. I saw my squadron was there. My people were there. You know, 2nd Brigade, 2nd Airborne was there, and we saw the results of the massacres and everything else. So once again, that comes to illustrate my point. If we leave the contested information domain open, the enemy will take it as key terrain, and we already see the advantages. That Gerasimov doctrine, you know, Russian new generation warfare. Again, it knows and understands that kinetically, the United States has the overmatch, right? I mean, force on force, we're predominant in the battlefield against a fires-based army like the Russians. Our combined arms maneuvers are probably superior force, but how do we level the playing field is through the information domain, through phase 0, 1, and 2 operations, right? That the shaping operations prior to the battlefield, inundating the battlefield with this information and creating a core of public opinion against the United States prior to any phase 3 force on force engagements is really, really important for the Gerasimov doctrine. And the Russians acknowledge that the information domain exists, and we already at war at that age. So if we don't do that, then we will place ourselves at a huge disadvantage during the next conflict. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Now, we should emphasize the information domain and accept that social media is just a small portion of it. So that being said, that's my take on your question. I don't know if that answers your question, but we can engage in conversation if you want to.
No, that answers my question.
You've talked about how important it is to recognize the importance of the information domain. So let's put that into practicality. Like, how can the individual best learn how to recognize disinformation or misinformation on social media?
Well, information and misinformation in social media is divisive. Disinformation in social media is divisive, and you can see our adversaries' blueprints, right? Whether it's Russian new generation warfare or our enemies, there's always the divisiveness blueprint. For example, our enemies code word for our diversity, and I'm not only speaking about diversity of race or religion or anything, also diversity of thought. It's called chaotic. They see the Americans as chaotic because we operate independently. We have an NCO core. We delegate leadership all the way to the lowest level, et cetera, et cetera. Things that a fires-based, static, conscripted army cannot understand, at least at this point. So the Russians' theory of the United States is that diversity is its weakness. So Russians dig deeper into pre-existing faults in American society by distracting, dividing, and weakening. So any post that you can see as distracted, dividing, and weakening, D, and W, you can expect some layers and layers of this information. And if you peel the onion, you can see the end result. But again, right, distracting, dividing, and weakening is very easy on social media because social media is marketed by emotions, both negative and positive. And those emotions are emphasized by the fact that there's instant gratification by posting and very little consequence management because you're separated by, I don't know, you can be right next door on the computer or you can be across the ocean, right? So deniability is very easy. So we can expect the same MO against the United States Army. I mean, we can take a snapshot in society. Um, Occupying the information domain with a clear and genuine and transparent message is an example of how to do things right. Again, the opposite of that is once somebody sees messages that divide, distract, and weaken, you can expect disinformation being the root cause of that pose, of that strategy, of that trend. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. You talk about how our enemies are using our promotion, say, of diversity and inclusion as we think of as a strength, and we know that it's a strength. But you've written a previous article on this exact topic, but our enemies are using it on social media as a way to promote that that's a weakness on our part. How do we combat that when people within the United States are putting stuff on social media that promote it as a weakness? Like, it's coming from our own people, not just our enemies.
So I mean, we got to give it context, right? So online social media platforms will always, well, at least for the foreseeable future, play an increasingly important role in U.S. extreme and radicalization processes. Not only our enemies, it's also domestic threats. Um, in recent years, the number of individuals relying on user-to-user platforms to disseminate radical content has grown. In 2016 alone, um, social media play a role in the radicalization of nearly 90% of extremists in the United States. That's 90%. That's a lot. Um, but our enemies know that only the enemy from within can defeat the United States, right? We are the greatest democracy in the world. We're the biggest democracy in the world. Yes, we have our problems, but we're still the biggest democracy in the world, and we are actively, just like our army is, actively fighting to correct the wrongs. That needs to be absolutely transparent, because that alone creates faith, creates hope, and creates transparency. And hope is important. I had a survivor instructor when I was cold and wet and miserable, and I mean, not cold, hot, wet, and miserable in the jungles of Guyana. Says, I mean, you will survive 10 days without food, 100 hours without water. You will make it 5 minutes without hope. So that also applies to the survival of our army and towards continuing the all volunteer force, which is our greatest strategic advantage. That being said, our enemies will attack that greatest strategic advantage, and the ability for the United States to say, look, we have a force for freedom ready to fight or win our nation's wars in as early as 18 hours, like the 82nd, that is composed entirely by volunteers from all races, all creeds, all origins, all walks of life. This is a beautiful thing. Attacking that, it's in our enemy's best interest. Dividing, weakening, um, and calling it names like, I don't know, like woke, or denying our females inclusion into combat arms. I mean, how is it possible that 50% of the American population didn't have include? Now we're doing it better, right? Denying those efforts is a key component of our enemies, both foreign and domestic, strategy to weaken the United States military. Change is painful, man. Change sucks. Change is difficult. We've done it before, and we achieve incredible results, but at the beginning, it's always difficult. The most important thing is to maintain the course, inform our population, not only our soldiers, but also the American people, from which we recruit actively, and we should continue to recruit actively to maintain the all volunteer force, and be absolutely transparent, just like um, 10th Mountain's CSM was. Hey, I own it. We made mistakes in the past. This is what we're doing, and we need your help. And honest to God truth, he had absolute great results and great feedback. That's the discipline initiative that we need to combat our enemy disinformation and our efforts to integrate our force. Over.
Yeah, that kind of leads to the next question. It's a good transition to the next question I have for you. Where you there's a place in your article here where you mentioned that the Army must invest in social media literacy. How can the Army do that? I mean, I know that there's a public affairs presence where that's part of their mission. and they're very well read on that. But how can the commander of your command or your unit or anybody's unit, what can they do to invest in social media literacy?
Well, we invest with social media literacy as part of the information domain. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not just becoming social media darlings. I mean, it will make no sense for a commander to hire an influencer or PCS an influencer or do this stuff just to get likes and hashtags, right? I truly despise that. I don't like it. But if a commander is given a weapon system, commanders in our army know how to use it. And the information domain is a weapon system, right? And it applies the same rules of the range. The same rules of the range apply. But I think by knowing the unit's purpose and communicating the unit's purpose, and creating information feedback loops, social media has the ability for the commander to, and then yes, you're going to receive bad comments, but it creates information feedback loops from the bottom up. So he or she can be aware of what's going on or what might be going on in this formation. And then reinforce the narrative with action and give purpose-based feedback and align behaviors with purpose. And it sounds like it's simplistic, but there is power in simplicity. And that's it. And I think that's how we're doing. It is a way to be engaged. If by no means replaces face-to-face counseling and face-to-face interaction and dialogue and sharing the hardship with your people and tough, realistic training. Let me emphasize again, tough, realistic training, right? It comes down to being a cohesive unit, and social media is just a tool. Unfortunately, that tool, that weapon, can also be misused. Yes, you have guidelines given by PAO, but then in our efforts to dominate the information domain, we have, I don't know, initiatives groups and different people that try to make guidelines and try to force people to post. No, it is a weapon system to be used sparingly and appropriately with a measured response and with clear and defined guidelines, just like you would use a rifle, a pistol, a Bradley, a tank, or anything else. It's got to be used measurably, um, to communicate, to emphasize, to illustrate, to collect feedback, and to inspire, not to get likes or just focus on the thing. Because remember this, social media is designed to have filters and make everything look better than what it is. And if we just focus on that, we will be disingenuous and hypocritical. And as an army, that goes against our army values. We must tell the truth. We must inform the truth. We must recognize the people that need to be recognized, like the soldiers, like our, our yeah, our different soldiers. And we have to recognize that sometimes we make mistakes and inform the people how we're going to fix it, like 10th Mountain did. I'm a big fan, but that's the way to do it. I think inherently commanders know how to use a weapon system. It is when the pressure of posting gets pressed upon them that it creates a burden for them, and it stifles creativity, their own personal identity, their own cultures, into how to inform their people. I think you should leave that to PAO and the larger army. I think the chief of staff of the army has some directives. I don't have them in front of me, but there is already directives and guidelines coming from the highest levels, how to inform, how to engage, how to use common sense. Now, when another independent initiatives come from under and force people to do so because, I don't know, because some influencer told them to do it, then that's what I have a problem with, with that, because we're using social media as a way to get hearts and likes and all that, instead of a platform for information and a weapon system to counter uh, foreign domestic threats. I think we need to keep our eye on the ball and know that this is a tool that is nested under the profession of arms and in the area of multi-domain operations under the information domain, but it is powered by the human domain. So the human domain is the most important. Again, social media is used to communicate, but it's a supplementary form of communication. The first one should always be face-to-face, sharing hardships, and positive leadership. Tough, realistic training to fight or win our nation's wars. That being said, we have to recognize that our enemies will occupy uncontested space if we leave it alone.
So after we posted the first part of the article, the first section, David Connell on Twitter posed a question that if I pose it to you, if you don't mind.
No, at all.
Yeah. So he says, what if we reverse this approach? Maybe it is the command teams that need to invest in learning social media behavior and developing trust in our newest generation who have naturally grown up in this environment. How would you approach that answer?
Oh my God, give the man a medal. That's exactly right. I mean, we didn't grow up in this information in this part of the information domain. Those guys know. So getting it goes back to my comment about creating information feedback loops and empowering the soldiers to use their voice and advise the commander. So his approach refers to bottom-fed feedback. But you're right, commanders and people like myself and people that grew up in the generation prior to the information domain explosion, we must get savvy into it, and we need to understand what is going on. And we have our informal advisors everywhere, soldiers that are savvy with social media, understand the trends, understand how this new generation of tactile learners that can process a lot more information than us think, and will adapt and can anticipate this stuff. But that I wish I would have written that in the article. That is incredibly accurate and correct, and I agree 100%.
Okay.
I've got another question here. I was just thinking too about when we're talking social media. There's certain individuals. Say for instance, Doctrine Man. He has a social media that has an enormous audience, and others. I think one other one, the Duffel blog or something like that. So
Yes.
there's things out there that that are influencing today's soldiers of all ranks. What do you say about that? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I say that it is a product. Those first of all, it is freedom of speech. Those websites are a product of how we left the information domain open. I mean, I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. I mean, why the rise of Duffel blog and Task and Purpose and Army WTF? And I said, well, they didn't rise. It's not like they were competing before. They were completely unopposed because we denied the information domain, and they filled the gap. And our soldiers recognize that. I mean, where do you and I go to get Army information? To the Army Facebook page or the Army website that were inexistent before that? Well, there was very little information. AKO, oh my God, it wasn't an efficient system to get information. I mean, the HRC website, no. I mean, right now, you wait till our soldiers nowadays wait till the list comes out on the Facebook page or somebody else informs you on social media because it is the most efficient way. We did have information out there, but we didn't do what ISIS did, which is target our younger audience, the audience that is growing up in this information domain, and in 10 or 15 or 20 years are going to become our senior enlisted leaders or our senior officers. So they have to, all their venues had to fill well, they didn't have to, but they were savvy enough to fill that gap, and now they are established. That's exactly what happened. So we must adapt as an army to inform that target audience with specific and viable venues that are designed for 21st century operations, and not something that you have to click 20 million times to get something out of it. I mean, that is just the truth. And again, going back to my original point, we have to accept what we haven't been doing right, or what is no longer viable in this day and age, and adapt it in quantum leap to serve a 21st century army. That's just the bottom line. We have to adapt and we have to evolve. Over.
There was that kind of brings up some questions, or a question here about social media and its power to evolve. I'm going to use it. Bring up an example. Twitter.
Yes.
Went from 140 characters, and then they evolved by now being it's now being limiting. Raising the limit to 280 characters. So that was a big change, and it affected the messages that went across, and it had a big impact. Another thing that, although it didn't develop, it kind of branched off from, like, say, YouTube, was TikTok, and it's become a powerhouse now of just, it's exploded over the past I'd say a couple of years. So where do you see social media here, say 5-10 years from now, and the Army's our part?
Well, in relation with that, we need to look at social media based on the generation we're trying to recruit and we're trying to maintain, right? And this generation is a lot information savvy and can process a lot more information than us. So they're hungry for information. Um, so I see social media evolving even to greater lengths. I see more sites, like when in the military sites, I see more sites informing, quote unquote, our population more, the evolution, task and purpose, Army W2F, and Duffel blog, and all things, under the umbrella of satire, but kind of, if you read Duffel blog, yeah, it is satire, but it sends a pointed message that is accepted and that is tailored to the younger generation. I mean, somebody there knows how our people think, how the youth think. I think the Army needs to do that way too. I see social media evolving into more tailored messages, informing more so than regular or traditional information channels, because it's faster, it's at the palm of your fingertips, and it can give you snapshots. Now that can be good and bad, right? But again, um, if commanders treat it as a weapon system, all you have to do is follow the rules of the range. Watch the muzzle and keep it pointed in a safe direction. Treat every weapon system as if it was loaded. Identify the target in the backdrop. And you can keep your finger off the trigger until ready to engage. That's it. I mean, how many people have gotten in trouble because of social media? And I'm not talking about juniors. I'm talking about senior leaders. So recognizing the social media is there to provoke a reaction. It's an action that is going to provoke a reaction because it is a business, right? It's based on likes and advertisement and everything else. And it's working. And Twitter is working. And Instagram is working. And those information venues on social media are working. We can only assume that they're going to evolve to a larger context. And they're going to start shifting into a more targeted campaign towards our youth. Uh, what that's going to be focused on, I don't know. But we need to be cognizant. And if we want to send the Army message, we need to evolve into 21st century information operations.
All right, I got one more for you, Sergeant Major. Now,
Yeah, man.
this I believe that soldiers bear, what kind of, well, actually, let me put it this way. What responsibilities do soldiers, say the young enlisted, three groups, the young enlisted, the NCO Corps, and the officer corps, what responsibilities do they each have when it comes to social media? As far as, you take that however you will.
I mean, it's cut and dry. I mean, we are an army, and an army is based on hierarchies, rules, and regulations, right? If not, there will be chaos. I mean, chaos in the sense that our enemies want to achieve. I mean, if we don't follow, there are rules and regulations that govern conduct, on and off uniform. The same applies to social media. One just can't post whatever one wants, and that is derogatory and everything else. Now, if it's anonymous, unless you run an investigation, you're not going to find out who did it. But if a soldier says something derogatory to command or grossly illegal on social media, there's got to be consequences. There's a uniform code of military justice that applies to that. That's what I say. It's simple, but we have to enforce those rules as well. Because an order without consequence management is just a request. Um, we have to remember that we are soldiers 24/7. We have to emphasize that whether you're an NCO, a junior enlisted, or a four-star general, the same rules apply when it comes to social media conduct. Now, the slip-ups, as you progress on the ranks, the higher ranking you are, the more of an image and the more of a the more consequences you have, the more impact you have on social media. So that's what we see more emphasis on the higher ranking enlisted and officers than on the juniors. But still, the soldier is a soldier. That's what we say. We have to have a campaign of education and ethics and everything else, just like we have for everything else in the Army, training and guidelines and mentorship and counseling and everything else. Is that done through social media? No, that is done through day-to-day interactions with engaged leadership that are considering the social media or the information domain as contested space, and they're letting this new generation know that they are being targeted both by nefarious actors and their own people. So it is a fine line to work for this generation. This new generation has a lot more problems and dilemmas than you and I had when we first joined. I mean, they're stuck with the I don't say stuck in a bad way. It is what it is. Multi-domain operations. We didn't deal with multi-domain operations back then. We deal with the air-land warfare. That's it. That's it. Force and force and land warfare. Now this guy's had cyber, IO, information domain, human domain, air, land. Everything is convoluted, multiple deployments and everything else. So again, social media is a good way to inform, but it is a supplemental way of leadership. The misuse or the overuse of social media or the overemphasis of social media indicates that you want to be a social media darling, not an Army leader, and that is counterproducing to Army values. Nothing replaces tough, realistic training designed to fight and win our nation's wars, and the care, legitimate care and mentorship of our men and women in our Army.
Is there any parting words or any extra advice you'd like to give to our listeners?
Yes. So I don't want the key takeaway to say that social media is evil. It's not. It's an excellent medium for sharing information, reaching out to geographically displaced personnel. But it's also a target-rich environment for nefarious actors, right, that are targeting mostly our youth. As a result, there's got to be a strong command presence coupled with action plans and expectations as required to protect command integrity and safeguard our soldiers and families. But we have to trust our commanders. They know, okay? They know. There's guidelines by PAO. There are guidelines by the Chief of Staff of the Army, but each and every single commander adapts a social media persona to benefit or to fill the needs of his, her unit and the culture and the identity. And we have to trust them and not stifle them or tell them, okay, well, you have to post because I'm posting. No, that doesn't work that way. We have to trust our commanders at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. And we have to educate them enough to say, this is what our enemies are doing. This is contested space. I am handling your weapon system, and I trust you use it accordingly, in accordance to the rules of the range. That's what I want to say. But my parting words will be, social media does not replace tough, realistic training and the genuine care and mentorship of our men and women. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, guys. This is awesome.
Thank you for joining us, Sergeant Major. And thank you, our audience. And remember to put your knowledge on the page, submit articles, and get published with the NCO Journal. And don't forget to follow us on social media. We'll catch you next time on the NCO Journal podcast.